Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for your patience, and probably some other folks will trickle in as we get going. So welcome to our webinar today. This is the Co-Parenting Through the Holidays webinar, talking about creating fair parenting plans for the family as you approach the holidays. My name is Melissa Rosenberg, and I'm a mental health provider. I'm a private practice therapist working with clients who are going through relationship transitions at all stages of the divorce process. I work with both individuals and couples. And I'm, aligned here with the Dellino Law Group, and I work with a lot of their clients as well as clients outside of the practice who are dealing with the emotional issues related to divorce. And so I'm here to be part of this today, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce you to Michelle Dellino, who is the managing attorney and owner of Dellino Law Group.
Sorry, technical issue. Hi, I'm Michelle Dellino with Dellino Law Group. I'm the managing attorney of our firm. We have a full service family law firm where we deal with high conflict, low conflict, mediation, all uncontested, all kinds of family law issues. And today we are going to talk about specifically co-parenting during the holidays and holiday parenting plan schedules and things of that nature. So this is a pretty targeted topic, so we're not going to get way off into all the other things we could get into on parenting plans. If you've come to our other webinars, you might know that we've talked about changing parenting plans, which is called a modification. We've talked about restrictions in plans, all kinds of different things we've gotten into before, and we're just going to limit this to talking about the holidays and things to think about when you approach those situations in co-parenting as well. So first thing I'm going to talk about is the difference between a temporary holiday schedule and a final parenting plan holiday schedule. So the thing to know here is a temporary parenting plan is a plan that's in place while your case is going on. So in a situation like where your case is filed and it's not finalized, it can take a while for a case to move through and get you to a final resolution, whether that's going to be in mediation or court. So a lot of the time you want to have a temporary parenting plan in place to establish a status quo and a new normal for your family. And as that relates to holiday schedule, if you have upcoming holidays, which are probably going to happen during the course of most divorce cases with children, you're going to need to know, how are we going to deal with that this year? How are we going to deal with that moving forward, not just this year? A temporary plan is going to be, what are we doing with what's coming up? Sometimes that might be what you continue to do in the future, and sometimes it may not be. But a temporary plan is exactly like it sounds, temporary. Sometimes temporary plans mainly become your final plan, but it's very common for a temporary plan not to deal with all of the holidays, just the ones coming up. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. A final parenting plan is what every single case that has children in it is one of the things that you're going to need. A court is not going to let you be divorced until you have a final parenting plan that very specifically deals with all of the holidays as part of it. You have to have a final parenting plan. Some people think, oh, can't we just do whatever we want to do and we'll figure it out as we go? And the answer to that is actually no. And the reason why is that if there's children involved, there needs to be stability and consistency. That's the general perspective of courts in Washington, and a parenting plan is a big part of that. So also important to note is that you can deviate from your holiday schedule and your parenting plan and your final plan if you want to, but think about your holiday schedule as the bottom line. It is a court order. Think of it as the bottom line if no one's getting along. So it might be one year you say, hey, I want to take the kids out of I want to take the kids out of town and I need an extra day on Thanksgiving break. Can we do that? And the other parent might say, sure, that's totally fine. But if the parent says no, then the schedule that's in the plan is the schedule that's in the plan. So some people think they're going to be constrained by a plan, and that's not the case if you still want to make other decisions. In your parenting plan, you're going to have to consider all kinds of holiday issues. You're going to consider first the traditional breaks. Every parenting plan is going to have a schedule for children before they enter school and afterwards. And sometimes the holidays obviously aren't going to apply to children who are preschool age. So if you have a child that's 2 years old, they don't necessarily have a midwinter break. They don't have a spring break. They don't have the same holiday break that kids have near Christmas and New Year's. So those things can change, but you're going to have a schedule that deals with all of those breaks, those longer breaks. And it's very common to see midwinter break, to see spring break, to see Thanksgiving, and then to see the holiday break as the big major decisions that need to be made about parenting time. It also means you're going to have other holidays included. So you're going to have all the 3-day weekend holidays. You're going to have everything from Veterans Day to Memorial Day, Labor Day. You're going to have to deal with all of those as well. And there's very easy ways that you can do that. So even if it sounds overwhelming, there are easy ways that you can do it. And you're going to have to deal with priorities. So sometimes you might have a situation where you have to determine what's going to take higher priority. Is it going to be a holiday break? Is it going to be a named holiday like Easter, if that's important to you? What's going to come first? Because sometimes there can be a conflict. And you're also going to deal with special occasions. Good parenting plans will think about special occasions and put those in. And what I mean by that is not, oh, this just came up this year and we're going to go do it. That's something you and the other parent can try to agree on, but something that's special to your family that you do every year. For example, I've had clients in the past where opening day of baseball season is really important to them. So they have, and both parents are fans. So they have, designated who gets to take the kids to opening day and if they get to miss school or not. So things like that. Or if you have, I've also had clients where they celebrate perhaps all of the Indian holidays, and those need to be specified, all of the Jewish holidays, and those need to be specified. So it's very important that you understand that there's not really a one-size-fits-all situation. What there is going to be is there's going to need to be a critical examination of your family, the holidays you celebrate, in addition to all of the named ones that are in, a school calendar, for example, and figuring out and thinking ahead about what are the things and what are the times that are going to be important to you. So a lot of the time, some people, might just look at the form parenting plan, check a few boxes and think, oh, this sets me up just fine. But what they're not thinking about are all the things that are not on that sheet. So a good parenting plan can be fairly lengthy when it comes to the holidays. So that's something to think about, are the things you're going to have to do. Another issue that comes up is decision making. So if you and the other parent have joint decision making, which is very often the case, you might have a situation where there needs to be a decision made about, someone missing extracurricular activities because they want to go on a trip for a holiday, someone signing up for extra activities, someone going to take part in a school play around Christmas time. All those different kinds of things are going to come up. So it's very important to be aware of what your decision-making protocol is and have one in your parenting plan. And that means if we don't agree about something, how are we going to go about diving into that decision and making it? A very common parenting plan decision-making protocol that I like to use says one parent proposes the decision to be made to the other parent. The other parent has 72 hours to respond and say yes or no. If they don't respond, it's going to be assumed that the decision can be made, because if not, you could hold somebody hostage just waiting to hear from you for days, which is not helpful. If the person says, no, I'm not going to allow for that decision to happen, then what's going to happen is they have to say if the objection is financial or if the objection is just because they want to say no and they don't really have a reason for it. So it's going to be important that you evaluate what the reasons are, have a good decision-making protocol so you know if we're going to be able to reach a decision. And if you can't reach a decision, then what your dispute resolution provision is. Something that I see that happens with decision-making around the holidays is people disagree about the interpretation of the parenting plan. They disagree about the exchange location. They disagree about what it actually says. And then they want to go and invoke dispute resolution, but they don't have time before the break that's coming up. So then it results in a fight. So how you can avoid that is be super, super crystal clear in the language that you use in drafting a plan. And like I said before, really do some deep consultation on your individual situation, not what's worked for your friends, not what's worked for your family members, because their situation is likely different than yours. And even though they mean well and they're telling you what's in their plan, I see this online. I see someone say, oh, does someone have a parenting plan I can copy? And that to me is like, the worst possible thing you could do, because that's how you end up with a parenting plan that makes no sense for your situation. So parenting plans should be definitely individually tailored when it comes to the holidays. And also, when it comes to a decision-making protocol, I see numerous parenting plans that don't have that. And then, it's not clear on how you're even going to make those decisions, which is not good at all. Melissa, I was going to keep going. Is that a problem?
No, but I do want to chime in for just a moment and let our participants know if you have questions that come up as the webinar is going along, please feel free to ask those via either the chat or the Q&A section here. If you ask something in the chat, they'll only come to me and then I can pitch them here. You can also ask them in Q&A. Either one works. If you do put them in Q&A, just know that either you need to put yourself as an anonymous asker or your name will show up with the question that you ask. So either one of those options is fine, but we do want to make sure that if you have questions that come up as this is going, please go ahead and pitch those so that we can answer them for you.
Great.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. One thing I would say too about holiday plans, before I began private practice, I worked for a court, and I'll never forget, it was like maybe a week before Christmas, and the judge I was working for said, "Oh, we were about to have the domestic relations calendar," and he said, "Oh, it's the last calendar before the break. Parents get to fight tooth and nail for their kids over the holiday," and just was telling me as a new lawyer, how sad that was. And I didn't really fully grasp how common it was at the time. I thought, gosh, what's wrong with these people? Why would they do that? And then I realized later that a lot of the time, it's not that there's anything wrong with the people that are having the fight. It's the result of a plan that's really not clear and they can't figure it out. And they also, aren't really putting the kids first. They're both just really still angry at each other. So don't be those people. That's one thing I will say. But going on from there, my whole point of that was to say that being flexible, and sometimes this is very difficult if you have a high conflict co-parent, but being flexible when it comes to holiday schedules, when it comes to birthdays, that's another thing you always want to include, is if you're going to have a child's birthday alternate between the parents, or if it should just be spent with the parent that has residential time. But anyway, I digress. Being flexible when it comes to holidays and special occasions is going to be helpful to you, because hopefully your co-parent will return the favor. And if you're thinking, oh, I have a high conflict co-parent and they're definitely not going to return the favor, it's still good if you can, at least once in a while, to take the higher ground, because if you end up in a litigation situation later, and you have examples of you being super flexible and trying to put the children first, that's going to put you in a far better light than someone who is withholding, putting an exchange 2 hours later because you wanted to take your child to the Nutcracker, and the other parent is saying no, so you can't go. So don't be that parent that does things like that. Be willing to go the extra mile if it's something that the other parent is trying to do with your child. If it's a situation, another thing that comes up a lot is out-of-town relatives coming in and one parent asking for extra time and the other parent saying no and not having a reason. Those kind of things will not reflect well on you later, especially if you have a temporary parenting plan and you're going through a custody evaluation, which could be with a guardian ad litem or a parenting evaluator or family court services or CASA, which are court-appointed special advocates for children. If you have a parenting evaluation or a custody evaluation of any kind going on, those kinds of decisions and the communications that you have with your co-parent are going to come into play when it's time to look at your final plan. So it's going to be important for you. Keep the kids and what's best for them at the forefront, even if it might be a little inconvenient for you. I'm not saying bend over, every single time and just keep taking all of the pressure from another parent, but taking the higher ground sets a good example for your kids. It shows them that you still value them having that relationship and doing something special with the other parent. And hopefully that parent will return the favor, but don't feel like you have to keep metaphorically turning the other cheek, but feel like it's a good idea to establish that kind of precedent. I would also say too, that something that we see come up a lot is an increase in stress during the holidays surrounding parenting decisions and how that can negatively impact your kids. A lot of the time, people think, oh, my kids are young, or they don't really know that I'm fighting with the other parent. They know. So they know, and then, we start to see things where then they come back and they have a hard time adjusting after the holiday break to school. or maybe they're having an issue with, their daycare, but they know. And so getting you as a parent, getting emotional support during the holidays, if you're dealing with a difficult situation anyway, is a really good idea. But I'll let Melissa chime in about that in a few minutes, but shielding your children from any conflict with the co-parent is extremely important. If you're saying, oh, dad wants the kids for an extra night and I don't want to give it to him, and you're talking to your friends about it on the phone, that's fine. You need to vent, but don't let your kids hear that. And the negative comments, everybody knows this, but it's an important thing to remember. The negative comments that you make about a parent, when it's the parent of your child is part of that parent. And when kids hear that, it makes them wonder if there's something wrong with them or if this is somehow their fault. And I can't stress to you enough how damaging that could be, or how you might think nobody's listening. And then, your child tells the guardian ad litem, oh, I heard mom say this or that about dad, or I heard dad, say this or that to my grandma about mom. And all of a sudden things are not looking good for you. Your child is hurting and you're going to have to explain that. So Melissa, why don't you talk about a little bit?
Yeah, definitely want to reiterate what you were just saying there. I think that's extremely important. And it's a tough trap to avoid because, often there is conflict and anger and resentment and challenging emotions that you're dealing with, which can be really, exacerbated during the holidays. And so, when keeping your kids away from that conflict and away from those negative comments is extremely important. It's like Michelle said, your kids are part of your ex, and that their other parent is a part of who they are. And so it becomes really confusing to them, and they do, run the risk of starting to doubt themselves and who they are, and also their allegiance. They need to be able to feel safe and secure with both of their parents. And so if you're poking holes in the credibility of their other parent, it could lead them to feel less safe and less secure when they're not with you, and that's not a good thing. And so definitely really trying to keep that away from your kids as much as possible, I think, is really important. I also wanted to say something else especially around the holidays. If this is a new separation, if you're dealing with, maybe the first or second year of being in separate homes, just really, any year, but certainly, especially in those first couple of years, listen to how your kids are feeling about it. Acknowledge that it's different, acknowledge that it's not how it was, and that's okay. And that's okay. Change is really challenging for most people, certainly for kids. And so be there and be willing to validate their emotions associated with this change. I think people sometimes try to kind of keep everything the same as much as possible. And that's a good thing too, to kind of keep some of the stability of the structure of things alive, but it is not the same anymore. And it's important to validate that for the kids. Hear what they have to say, hear how they feel about it. And at the same time, instill hope that the new change, the newness of it all can still be a happy, healthy thing. It's just different. But acknowledge the uncertainty and confusion and pain that can be involved with such a big change. Sometimes also getting involved with starting some new family traditions is a good thing in, with the new formation of your family. This is you still have a family, but your family is in a different form. And so what are the new family traditions that you're going to enact in order to kind of bring a little bit of hope and excitement for the kids?
Definitely. And to tack on to what Melissa is saying, there, depending on the age of your kids too, can really depend on what to review with them and how to talk to them about it. But a lot of parents, there's different books that you can use as resources that your attorney might be able to guide you to, or friends might be able to guide you to, that talk about, 2 holidays, 2 houses, and new traditions. The kids get excited about that. So there's things that you can do to really, to help them really crystallize those things. I would also say too, that if you're going through, a new holiday the first time, what Melissa said is so important, is in not pretending that everything's the same or everything's fine, acknowledging your kids' needs. Because again, as an attorney, part of my job is to think for you about what's going to happen if you're in a custody evaluation, and wanting to know, your kids are going to want to talk about things. And so you should be the person that they're talking to, or, their therapist as well. But as their parent, you should really take the lead in that, whether you're in a custody evaluation or not. But if you are, I can't help but tell you that it's helpful for, someone to hear that you're emotionally there for your children in what is already a very difficult time for you. So you should get your own emotional support too. Melissa, it looks like there's a question. Do you want to ask that?
Yep.
I can't read.
Yep. Okay, question here asks, what if we have not explicitly stuck with the holiday plan in place? And they kind of give an example. Spouse is supposed to have the kids for Thanksgiving on even years, but they didn't get them last year because of COVID and other family situations. Mm-hmm. Now this year, he's saying he's entitled to have the kids for Thanksgiving because he didn't have them last year. What do we do?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a great question. And, COVID has posed some really interesting situations because and I'll start with this. It's totally possible that many people missed holiday time due to COVID. That did happen. But if a parent withheld a child because of COVID, unless it was really like a safety risk or whatever, or it was a decision that both parents made, that wasn't okay. It was very clear. It was very clear in the state of Washington that parenting plans were to be followed. So sometimes people will say, hey, I should have got makeup time. And the actual truth is, yes, you should have. So this is aside from, I'll get to the holiday question in a minute, but there was a lot going on during COVID regarding, I can't exercise my time, or one parent saying you can't have your time. That was more common because I don't want my child being in two different houses. And reality is that was not acceptable. So if that happened, or if a parent was sick or a family member was sick and they lost time because of that, there was an expectation that makeup time should be granted. So hopefully, you don't have to go to the court or whatever to deal with that or go through dispute resolution. But if you are in that situation, I just want to say you should get makeup time. As far as holidays go, if you didn't get Thanksgiving last year because of COVID and your child or children couldn't be with you, I'd have to look at your plan, but what I would specifically say to the other parent in writing, whether you communicate via email or whether you use a parenting program like Talking Parents or Our Family Wizard, sending a request and saying, hey, obviously I missed my Thanksgiving last year and you had the kids. Can we confirm a switch for this year? And if they say no, then, and you have, joint decision-making on everything, or even if you don't, if you have dedicated, even odd holidays and they say no, then that would be something you would want to invoke dispute resolution on. You could also potentially bring that as before the court, but you should try dispute resolution first because it would fall under a disagreement about the parenting plan. It's interesting because now, since COVID, I've been doing my parenting plans with like disaster provisions. So that's already addressed, but that was never a thing before. So, parenting plans generally usually don't have something saying that you would get this year if you missed a holiday due to a pandemic or other medical reason. But I would recommend putting it in writing, asking the other parent if they can work with you and make it work, outlining the switch, and then just saying you'll realign so they get the next year. And memorializing that. If they say no, then I would look at my dispute resolution situation. And if it's mediation or arbitration or court intervention, I would do it, because here's the other thing to know. Thanksgiving might seem like it's far away, but we're knocking on the door of October 1. And if you need to do something like mediate or arbitrate, or if you need to go to court for something, you need to do that like now, because the mediators, arbitrators, and especially court are extremely booked out, and you want to make sure you have time. It's like I talked about earlier. You could have a situation that you need to resolve with dispute resolution and not even litigation necessarily, and then you might run out of time to do it. So ask your other parent in writing, see what they say, and if not, use your dispute resolution provision. So yeah, that's a tough situation, but COVID created so many of these situations that nobody ever could have anticipated, but it has also changed the way that we deal with, parenting plan provisions. I also did want to note too, that access to information, there should be a provision in your plan. If you don't have one, it's okay, but good parenting plans will also have, provisions about both parents having access to information and being responsible for getting information. And the way that comes up around the holidays is really concerning holiday breaks, early release, school programs, things like that. And I see a lot of the time someone saying, oh, well, this comes up a lot. I'm supposed to have the kids starting 5 p.m. the last day of school. but they're out of school on early release that day. I didn't know. And whose obligation is it to deal with that extra time? Do I get the kids earlier? Like all those kinds of things. So it's important that you are both in tune with what's going on with your school calendar, and what's happening, especially not just around Christmas, but another thing that comes up a lot is end of the school year. And sometimes if parents have a long distance plan where one parent is having a lot of the summer, or even on a local plan where the parents have different weeks of vacation they can exercise, and then there's snow days tacked on, or there's extra in-service days tacked on at the end of the year, and one parent doesn't know that, don't be the parent that doesn't know what's going on. And that's, maybe during a marriage, one parent was kind of the go-to for all of that, and the other parent did other things, but it's something that you really have to transition to. And both parents not being responsible for access to information creates so many issues. And sometimes your child will end up missing out on something because you didn't know, and that's not something good. Or you didn't know there was a special occasion field trip and you made plans to travel that day for a holiday because you had vacation time. Nothing wrong with that, but if you'd known, you might have planned it later, then your child wouldn't feel like they missed out. So things like that definitely come up. But I would say just overall, if you don't have a parenting plan and you're in the middle of drafting one, be very careful with the holidays. And common things to deal with are when they actually are, special occasions, start and stop times for holidays are super important too. Deciding whether those times are going to be consistent with the rest of your parenting plan, or maybe they're going to be a little later because they're holidays. Thinking about how you want to deal with winter break. There are numerous ways that you can deal with it. And talking to someone to figure out what's best for your family is going to make the most sense. How you're going to deal with Thanksgiving, if it's certain examples are, if it's going to be from Wednesday when school lets out all the way till Sunday or Monday, if it's just going to be a Thursday, Friday holiday, lots of different things that you have to think about. How you're going to deal with 3-day weekends. Is it going to go with the parent that has that weekend? Are you going to designate those long weekends? Evens and odds, what are you going to do there? How you're going to deal with a child's birthday. Some plans will deal with a parent's birthday if they want that in there. It's not always in there, but it can be. How you're going to deal with, like I said, those special events, like maybe a Nutcracker every year, or opening day of baseball, or anything that's special to your family. If you have cultural or religious holidays that you need to take into consideration, like I said, I've done whole parenting plans dealing with, Rosh Hashanah, Hanukkah, all kinds of things like that for Jewish holidays, also dealing with Indian holidays, Diwali, and numerous other ones, or dealing with Native American cultural, just all kinds of different plans. So if you have things that matter to you, get them in the plan, because I can't stress to you enough how difficult it can be to make either minor or major modifications to your plan later. It can be very difficult. A good parenting plan is a roadmap for you and the other parent, and it provides the stability for your child that they need. So holidays bring up kind of all of the things emotionally and also logistically. So as you get ready for that, if you have a temporary plan already, look at whether, this is really important too, look at whether your temporary plan deals with the upcoming holidays. Sometimes you might get a temporary plan, and it's very common for that plan to say those holidays are all reserved because you thought you were going to have your case settled before you came up to them. And then, oh, I don't know, COVID happened, your case got continued, any number of things happened, and now you're going to have to deal with Christmas and Thanksgiving. You have nothing in your parenting plan. If that's the case, you've got to figure out how you're going to deal with that now, and either amend or modify the temporary plan, or come to an outside agreement that's binding on the parties. Something like that's going to happen. If you already have a plan and you're not worried about that, but you have to figure out a final plan, it's going to be important that you look at what's been working for you in your temporary plan as far as regular time, what's not working for you, what's coming up, and start thinking about a more detailed plan as well. If you already have a plan and you're post-divorce, that's good, and congrats. And what you want to do is really think about, am I following the plan? If I'm not following it, do we have an agreement? So the last thing you want is to be held in contempt of a holiday schedule. Does the plan that we have still work for us? Has there been a substantial change in circumstances that might necessitate changing the plan? Like one parent moved out of state, so obviously it doesn't make sense for them to have the same time that they did. Any number of things like that. So evaluating your plan and whether it still works for you is super important. Even though it's difficult to change, there are instances where that needs to happen. Remember to be flexible. Like I said, your co-parent hopefully will return the favor, and if they don't, at least you're taking the higher ground. So you will be setting a good example for your child and looking better for the court or a custody evaluator if necessary, or at least maybe feeling better for yourself. kids should be first, keep the focus there. Don't say things during the holidays, even though it can be a time when there's a lot of emotions, and just do the best you can. That's really the whole thing to know is divorce is difficult, and being post-divorce and having to co-parent with someone is extremely difficult. So do the best you can, maintain sanity, maintain grace, and you're going to be fine. So that's all I've got today. Thanks so much for joining us, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you coming today, and look out for our next webinars as well as our monthly meetup group. Take care all. I'm going to post a slide here with our contact information as well. Definitely reach out if you'd like to be in further contact. Thanks, everybody.